The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So exactly as predicted, Iran is going to continue retreating from the nuclear deal that Donald Trump brazenly came in and said, hey, the United States is going to get out of this deal, even though Iran didn't actually do anything to violate the deal. And the only part about, I mean, listen, this is all so predictable, Pat. If you are Iran and you do everything right, and in comes Donald Trump and says, we're getting out of this deal, it's not a good deal, and you have at no point done anything wrong, you would immediately, both by game theory logic, by normal social convention, by economic logic, you would immediately go back to the activity that you believe could be beneficial for you, which is to develop nuclear technology, possibly for the use of nuclear energy, possibly for use of nuclear weapons. Having both is good for countries on the geopolitical stage. We know that. And the only disappointment is that it is now, after the fact, being used as evidence to say, see, Trump was right to get out of the deal because they can't be trusted. No, they did everything right until Trump said we were backing out of the deal.
And of course, most Republicans were opposed to the Iran deal, I think because it was a signature accomplishment of Barack Obama, more so than anything else. But I don't think those other potential Republican presidents, like a President Scott Walker or Jeb Bush, would have pulled out of the deal, because even though they would say that they disagreed with it, they would understand that it would look really bad from a global perspective if the U.S. backed out of their word, and that it would potentially lead to Iran wanting to fire back and do whatever they can to build up their uranium enriching. And that's exactly what they're doing here. And so Trump totally screwed us over on this one.
It's just basic geopolitics. And again, every time we do this, it's like, you know, it almost sounds like we're saying we like Jeb Bush, or when we say George W. Bush never would have done this, that we're remembering George Bush with rosy-colored glasses. No, we're just saying that on certain things, Donald Trump has set a new low, and most of those things have to do with relationships with allies, the sort of coarsening of the language and discourse that is acceptable in politics, and beyond that, the way in which he ignores standard geopolitical norms, which is if you're in a deal, you don't back out of it if no one's broken the deal. And of course, Iran is already accelerating the rate at which it's enriching low-grade uranium fourfold. It's not gone yet beyond the limits set by the deal, but they are getting closer and closer to that, and very well may. And I mean, I guess, what do we have to say beyond that? Just, I hope that the next president can put a deal back in place, because I don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and I also hope that this isn't part of Trump's master plan to wage war with Iran. Like, I'm thinking he just pulled out of the Iran deal because he said he was going to on the campaign trail, and he wanted to serve his base. That's likely what it was. But there's also a potential of Trump playing three-dimensional chess here, which is that he pulls out of the Iran deal knowing that Iran would go back to enriching and violate the terms of the deal now that the U.S. is no longer in it, and then Trump would have a justification to go to war with Iran, backed, of course, by the neocons in his administration now, like John Bolton. That I'm much more worried about.
All things to be worried about, and that, yes, something to be acutely worried about. And we'll also see with an election upcoming what the political dynamics are of what, again, Trump may threaten to do or do for political reasons only that are separate from geopolitical reasons. Hey, here's something interesting from the world of passwords. I have a bunch of different passwords that I use on different websites, and I have a way of storing them securely where nothing is stored in plain text, or I don't even store the full passwords. I store references that tell me what the password is. So like, imagine that I have 5 different passwords that I rotate through. I have an encrypted file where when I open it, it doesn't even have my password. It might have the first letter of a password, and it's still up to me to remember which password that signals. But all of this stuff apparently is completely unnecessary. And websites that force you to change your password every couple of months to one that you've never used before actually can create less secure situations by causing the need to regularly change passwords that don't actually make your account more secure. And there's a very interesting interview in USA Today with Google product manager Mark Risher, who says, every time we are given tougher and tougher requirements for password creation, we're not really increasing the security on our accounts. We're not really preventing password breaches, because if there is a breach or if there is a phish, you are going to, no matter what your password is, it's going to get to the person who is hacking it. Yes, complicated passwords may be good to protect your password from people who know you and might try to social engineer. If it's your ex-significant other and they go and they know the names of your pets and your birthday and whatever, it's possible that if you have a really simple password, they might be able to sort of figure out what it is. But from the point of view of phishing and password breaches, the constant changing of passwords and requirements of symbols and capital letters and all this stuff, fundamentally, it's not actually making us more secure. That's the key takeaway, Pat, which to me is not totally surprising.
Not surprising at all. I know sometimes with apps that you get nowadays, you can choose to enter a new username and password, but you can also just do that single sign-on thing. Like you can say, I want to sign in with Google or I want to sign in with Facebook, and then you pretty much just have to click on the thing and it's over with. I like that a lot more. I'm also not hyper sensitive or way too worried about my data getting breached because I don't think I have that much to hide. But I've been told that that's a bad justification for things. Back in the day, I used to just use letters for my password, and then we as a society said that that was not safe enough, so we started having to include numbers. And then I had a great password that I had with numbers, and I used that for everything. And then as a society, we decided that that wasn't enough, so we had to start adding symbols to it. Then I made a password that I used for everything that included the symbols and the numbers. And then everything seemed to have come full circle again because some websites started to disallow certain symbols from being used. Like you could no longer use the @ sign or the exclamation point or whatever. So then I had to have a bunch of different passwords for things, and things got very, very complicated. And I don't like that world. I don't want to have to live in that world.
Well, the simpler path forward that is being outlined by Google's product team is that it's going to be a souped up version of two-factor authentication. So already there's lots of websites where when you sign in, if you haven't saved your browser or signed in from that website before, you need to either get a text message to your phone, physical phone, which you then input into the website, or you need to open Google Authenticator or a different authentication app which generates one-time use codes on a constant rotating basis. And so it makes it much more difficult, and it makes it less important how secure your password is as long as you know it, because then it triggers a secondary security method, either via email or your phone or a phone call or an authenticator app. And this is the idea that is going to go forward, according to people from both Google and Apple, which is just the tightening up more advanced versions of these authentications. So you can imagine, instead of having to type in a code generated by your phone, if when you want to sign in, you have to hold your phone up to your eye and do, is it an iris scan or a retinal scan? I think it's a retinal scan. That is going to be a second layer of authentication that will be much more difficult to fake unless someone rips out your eyeball, I guess. So this is generally the idea, that the passwords themselves need to have a basic level of security, but that having some kind of backup second layer that is very difficult to fake no matter what you do is probably the path forward.
I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Apple that was tinkering with facial recognition to unlock your iPhone.
Right.
And people were very excited about it until, of course, we all found out that it was very easy to hack because you could just take a picture of someone, hold it up in front of the iPhone, and that would unlock the phone. Now, I'm sure they could get a little bit more fancy with it, like make it so that you have to smile or frown or, like, I don't know, blink or something. And based on the instructions that you were given, that would unlock the phone if you adhere to those instructions.
Right.
But I think those could probably also be tricked. So maybe that isn't the future.
Maybe it's not, but I think something along those lines is inevitably going to develop. And in the meantime, I'm just using different passwords, making them as complex as required, but not more so, and sort of practicing normal safety mechanisms, I guess, with my data. And I now have 10 cell phones also, which really helps everything other than my sanity. So that's, at least I got that going for me. So listen,
would you mind, would you mind just, because I want some inspiration for passwords that I can make up. Would you mind just like showing me the ones that you're using? Because that way I can kind of have some idea of what I should be doing with those.
Yes, I'll send them to you in plain text via email as soon as we finish up today. And then you can, just print it out and stick it on your monitor there. Okay, California prison inmates who possess small amounts of marijuana are not guilty of a felony crime, according to an appeals court, which reasoned that because cannabis is legal in small amounts in California, it's also legal in small amounts inside prisons. Now, it can still be illegal to smoke or ingest cannabis in prison because the prison doesn't allow drug usage. it can still be against prison guidelines, meaning that it could be confiscated. But the whole big crux of it is, if possessing marijuana outside of prison in small amounts is not illegal, then it's also not illegal to possess it inside of prisons. In the same way that cigarettes could be contraband, but they are legal. Therefore, it's not a felony to have cigarettes in prison, but they could be confiscated. You could conceivably be put in solitary. I don't know. Every prison would have different rules. But the gist of it is that if it's not illegal outside, that amount of possession should not be legal inside. And that is what an appeals court has now decided. And I believe it is the right decision.
I feel like it's kind of putting prisoners in a legal limbo, similar to after recreational marijuana got passed in various states across the country. Before, like, the dispensaries were set up, oftentimes it would be illegal to purchase marijuana, and it would be illegal to grow marijuana, but it would be totally fine to possess the marijuana. So it kind of put you in a strange position, because it's like you have to obtain it somehow through illegal methods, but once you get it, it's legal. Like, that just doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. And fascinatingly, I have a friend now who is developing a pretty sizable what's called CBD flower business, which is extremely low THC hemp, which of course is the same plant as cannabis, which is now legal as an industrial product because of the 2014 and 2018 farm bills. And there are a whole bunch of these issues about selling across state lines. It's legal to grow it in one state and to sell it in another state as an industrial producer, but it would not be legal to move it between state lines in certain situations. So, like, how do you get it from the state in which you grow it to the state in which you sell it? It's not clear. You have to, you need teleportation or something like that.
And with this California ruling, it's apparently illegal still to smoke or ingest the cannabis while in prison.
Yes.
But there are different methods of taking in marijuana now. Like, would a sort of like atopical gel, would that be fine? Because that's not smoking or ingesting. Would vaping be okay? Because that's also not smoking or ingesting. I think at the end of the day, though, it's good that this is not going to add on to people's prison sentences, because I just don't think it should.
No,
I don't think it should be allowed or permitted in the prison. But if you're serving, let's say, 5 years for armed robbery, I don't think they should be tacking on another 2 years because you had marijuana.
No, let me push back. I agree with everything you're saying, except maybe one thing. I mean, maybe it should be allowed, not smoking, because the smoke is a hazard. But listen, maybe prisons would be better places if cannabis edibles were allowed, and people would be more laid back and relaxed, and it would reduce the number of fights. I'm just asking the question. Yeah. I don't really know. I'm
totally open to the idea. The only concern, I think, would be trading for it. Like, would the prison have to be selling it directly to the prisoners? That would be just like a totally different world that we're living in here. Also, I guess there's the argument that some would make that prison is supposed to be not only rehabilitative, but also punitive. And so that if you're just giving people marijuana, it's going to be seen as more like a party time rather than time that they're serving in prison. That may be, yeah. There are a lot of different factors. It's so funny. Every time I go back to Northampton, Massachusetts, where I was over the weekend, it used to be that the cops were fining people and arresting people for marijuana. And now the cops are hired to direct traffic at a hugely popular recreational marijuana dispensary on one of the city's main roads. It's funny coming into town and seeing police everywhere at the pot place, making sure that the cars remain orderly and that people are able to get their legal pot as quickly and efficiently as possible. It just confirms that this entire system of what's legal and what's illegal, it's just a construction. It's just a human construction at its core. Well, at least it reinvigorates my hope in the democratic process. Like, for the longest time, marijuana was illegal, and then it was decriminalized in Massachusetts, and the voters got sick of it. They didn't want to have to deal with the fines. They didn't want to have to deal with the resources it takes to crack down on marijuana possession, and they turned around and legalized it, and now we live in a whole new world. All right, that does it for the bonus show today. We will be back with a new show and a new bonus show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.